And now we will hear from various utility stakeholders and how their respective industries are faring in meeting the 2030 goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We will hear about the impact on their industry and the challenges and opportunities that they are faced with and how those decisions affect the consumer as well. Listen closely as we hear how complex this issue really is. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Erika Cabrera, Local Public Affairs Representative for Pacific Gas and Electric, and yet another HLI alumna, class of 2013. I hope you have taken note of how many alumni of our Hope Leadership Institute have taken part in this video. We are so proud that these women have immersed themselves in these complex issues.
The goal for investor-owned utilities is to reduce it by 33% by 2013, and I'm proud to say that PG&E has reached that mark 3 years in advance. When you look at our portfolio of not only renewable energy from wind and solar, and you incorporate large hydro projects as well as nuclear, 80% of our renewable energy is clean. Although we recognize that there are increased costs for providing clean energy, I think the benefits to the community outweigh that. Some of the challenges are that building the adequate infrastructure. PG&E right now has electric vehicle charge network program, and we are tasked with installing 7,500 charging stations in our service territory. So although it may be a challenge to implement and identify the locations, it's a benefit that we'll be able to serve the community that we represent. I think in terms of new technology, we've already talked about solar rooftops and that 20% are plugged into PG&E's grid. The next step is looking at ways to be innovative. Is that battery storage? How do we find a way to capture what we are already generating?
Thank you, Erika. Up next, you will hear from Maria Ventura, Public Affairs Manager for Ventura County at Southern California Gas Company, an HLI class of 2006.
Just like electricity, natural gas can be renewable too. And what I mean by that, many of us know about the natural gas that occurs because I'll call it dinosaur natural gas that's in the ground, but also natural gas, or methane, if I may say, occurs naturally. It's a decomposition of matter. So you can find it at landfills, you can find it at wastewater treatment plants, you can find it on farms. And if we capture that methane, we can condition it and put it back into our pipelines. So in essence, what we have done is we've captured that carbon that would have been released into the air, put it into our pipelines, and that's called renewable natural gas. So if we were only to harness about 16% of that renewable natural gas into our pipeline system throughout California, we can meet or exceed the California climate goals. So natural gas is the preferred choice. Over 90% of people actually use it to heat their homes. They use it for cooking. People also can use it for businesses, for example, use it to power their engines, also use it during the workplace, and we can use it in the transportation sector. So we have a natural gas powered engine that is near zero carbon emission that's in existence, and we also power public transportation. You may have seen of compressed natural gas powered buses. If we were to use renewable natural gas on all of those different vehicles that are powered, we're actually enhancing the elimination of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's an exciting time. And unfortunately, what's happening now is much of that solar energy is actually wasted away because we don't have a form of really storing it effectively. We have a solution for that. It's called power to gas. And how that works is we can capture the excess solar energy, wind energy, and through some chemical work, which I won't get that into, we're able to put that into our pipeline. So the easiest way I could describe it as, think of our pipeline now has become a form of a battery. And since it's already pre-existing, the costs are minimal with that. And then we could do with that energy when the customers need it and we need to produce electricity. As we all know, 60% of our electricity is actually produced by natural gas. So when we need that electricity, we can pull that energy from our pipelines and use it to produce electricity. So by using power to gas, that could be an effective method for us to store our energy.
Thank you for your insights, Maria. And now you will hear from Laura Janau, Managing Director of State Regulatory Affairs for Southern California Edison. In her role, she leads the company's San Francisco office, which advocates on issues pending before the CPUC, including rates, transportation electrification, transmission setting, safety, and procurement policy. She is also an attorney.
Well, the electric industry is faring very well. We have significantly reduced the greenhouse gases that we emit as an industry. We're down to about 19%, so well on our way to meeting the 2030 goal that the state has. There are other industries that aren't faring as well: transportation, industrial, commercial, but we are doing very well. We're doing all we can to meet that goal, including electrification of vehicles. We've developed what's called a clean power and electrification pathway, which is our company's vision of how we can meet the goal in the future. And that includes increased numbers of electric vehicles, increased electrification of homes, home heating and space heating, and then also increased commercial and residential electrification. One of the big challenges we're going to have in meeting the state's goal is getting people to want to buy an electric vehicle. And people will feel more inclined to do so if there's an infrastructure for charging, if they don't have to worry about getting their car from point A to point B without running out of battery power. It's a tremendous opportunity for our industry. A lot of great jobs are going to come out of increased numbers of renewables, the infrastructure required to build out transportation electrification. If you think about having new homes go all electric, that's an incredible opportunity for people with skills in transforming homes to zero emissions homes. So it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for the industry in the next 12 years. But the industry does have some challenges. One of the big ones is wildfire. And you think about wildfire in the context of climate change, and you're like, well, what do you mean? Well, so when we have a major fire, you emit smoke into the air. You pollute the air. And that threatens to wipe away all of the great work that we're doing toward reducing the GHG in our environment. So we're going to have to figure out as a state how to get wildfire under control. That's the first step, right? The second step is then, how do we get people into electric vehicles? How do we get people to want to use technological advances, like increased use of batteries? How do we get them to want to adopt a different looking space heater, or a different looking water heater? Like, there are some very real sociological challenges and social challenges with how people interact with their homes, with their environment, with their technology.
Thank you, Laura. And now, to bring it home, I am excited to introduce Maite Sanchez, State Affairs Liaison for California Independent System Operator, a nonprofit corporation that is responsible for operating 80% of California's power grid system. Maite will walk us through how the grid works and what we need in order to meet the greenhouse gas standards.
The state is in charge of selecting the resources, and then the way the ISO comes into that picture is that we are the independent entity that is a grid operator that takes those resources for 80% of California and distributes them across the state, depending on if there's congestion, what's the most economic way to do it. So our main priority is to ensure reliability, and we're doing that on a continuous basis. So one of the challenges actually as grid operators is, how do we go from, historically we didn't have all of these renewables. So historically we had resources like natural gas and coal, and those resources were what's known as baseload, so they were more constant and hence more controllable as grid operators. But then when you introduce the concept of renewables, you suddenly shift this paradigm, and now what you have is resources that aren't necessarily producing when we tell them to, but more so when the weather tells them to. So something that had to drastically change for grid operators, or has drastically changed, is we've incorporated a lot much more advanced technology, and one of our focuses is advanced forecasting. So one of the big issues that we have to look into, or one of the big factors that we look into every single day, is, what does the weather look like? What's going to be happening? Is even when the solar produces, it could produce at different capacities. So you can have more energy because of that, or less if there's, for instance, a fire going on. As the ISO, as grid operators, we've always seen that in order to meet these ambitious environmental goals, as we currently are doing right now, we need a mix of solutions. You can't rely just on one, because if you rely on one for a lot of different reasons, but it's not going to be the most cost-effective for California ratepayers. So to do all of this, we need to ensure that we're trying to minimize costs to ratepayers. And so there's a lot of different things, but speaking to a couple, you need, as I said, flexible resources. So we need advanced technologies to be able to respond quickly, but then you need some storage to come online. We do produce a lot of solar, but sometimes we actually have more solar than we can actually use. And as I previously said, because it's consumed and produced immediately, we need to have a place for that energy to go because we don't have any room for not to be consumed. As grid operators, we have these reliability standards where, yes, you can have the energy producing, but you also need these additional services to ensure that that energy is constant and not necessarily going up and down and kind of out of control. For instance, natural gas is an incredible, great resource when it comes to what we call ramping. So right now, during the evening periods, we rely on natural gas pretty heavily. And what that resource is able to do is quickly come online and respond to the resource. So things like that, and that's how we look at it. We're really not one to say, or that isn't our role to be saying, you should pick this resource over the other. It's how are we going to maintain reliability, and what can your resource do to help that.
Thank you everyone for your undivided attention as we heard from various stakeholders. I hope that you have a better understanding of California's environmental and energy issues, understand the economic impact of AB 32 and SB 32, and understand the state's current greenhouse gas production and what it needs to be to reach the 2030 goals. So are you more informed but just as confused? This is a complicated issue with a lot of moving parts that can affect parts of our state in different ways. This is an issue at the forefront in Sacramento, and we want you to understand what is happening so that when you are called to lead, you have some knowledge and understanding and feel empowered to take action. Are you ready to ask more questions and ensure that you are leading your community and family? I hope that you have enjoyed this fun educational journey. And one last time, Noelia, take it away.